welcome to our 36th Peer Mediation Conference, coming together through mediation, talk story. My name is José Barzola with the Mānoa Institute for Peace here at the University of Hawaiʻi at Manoa. Our talk story today is on Indigenous conflict resolution practices with Naomi Schubert and moderated by myself. So thank you so much to coming through today to learn a little bit further about the field of conflict management in all its formats. Today's talk story is actually part of the Peer Mediation Conference. It's been bringing together youth peer mediators for over 30 years now. This is the third year of the conference that has gone virtual, well, partially virtual, in person. We are still keeping the virtual moving forward just to have an open space for folks in the community to continue to learn about peer mediation. But separately, we are still doing private gatherings for active peer mediators to be able to interact with each other, get to know each other. So the events, so this is the third year. We are partially virtual to connect peer mediators around Hawaii and others aspiring to develop their own peer mediation programs. Today, thank you for joining us for a discussion and a dialogue around how, with mediation and conflict resolution practices having a foundation in Western ideologies, how can Indigenous perspectives evolve these methods, Indigenous practices of conflict resolution, specifically hoʻoponopono, Native Hawaiian practice of mediation, offers an alternative view of how to deal with global, domestic, or even personal relationships. Our guest today is Naomi Schubert, who is a student in her fourth year right here at the University of Hawaiʻi at Manoa, studying political science and also getting her undergrad certificate in peace studies. Naomi grew up on the island of Hawaiʻi and graduated from Kamehameha Schools in Hawaii, where she was taught about the values of hoʻoponopono amongst other traditional practices. Her research aims to bring awareness to Indigenous perspectives and the importance of implementing such practices, especially on Indigenous land. So thank you so much, everyone, for being here today. And thank you, Naomi, for being with us today as well. To get us started, I'm going to turn it over to you and let me know how I can best support you.
Thank you for that introduction and for allowing me to share my mana'o today. I'm really excited and also very nervous. So thank you to everyone for being here, and bear with me while we get through today, but I'm just really excited to share this topic with you. Conflict resolution is something that I've always had an interest in, especially in negotiations and mediation, but how can I apply like my cultural perspective to Western traditions is something that I grew an interest in over my time at Mānoa. It's funny because I met José by accident. I was sitting outside an elevator. I used to sit there before one of my classes, and he just walked by to go to his office, and one day he was like, "Do you want to sit on a chair, with a table, AC in the room?" And I was like, "Oh, sure." And he welcomed me into his office, and I learned about the Mānoa Institute, and now I'm doing a certificate in peace studies with them, and I'm really excited to be a part of their program and to have been able to do practicum with them this semester and just be able to be a part of everything. So I'm gonna share my screen now. If it works. Okay, can everyone see this? Yeah, okay. Well, this is my presentation, Indigenous Conflict Resolution Practices. Again, my name is Naomi Schubert. I'm a senior in political science here at Mānoa. I graduated from Kamehameha in 2020, and I'm actually going to be attending law school at William S. Richardson this fall, so I'm really excited. And again, I'm doing a certificate in peace studies with the Mānoa Institute. Or not. There we go. Okay. Today I'm going to be talking about, I'm just going to go over briefly what mediation and conflict resolution are and what those topics are, and then also just traditional Western practices. And then I'm going to dive into Indigenous practices, not just ho'oponopono, even though that's my main focus for this presentation, but I also want to just recognize and shine a light on different Indigenous practices throughout the world. And then I'm also going to be talking about the implications of my research and just a lot of what I've been able to take in over the course of the semester. So what is conflict resolution? Conflict resolution is defined as a way for two or more parties to find a peaceful solution to a disagreement. That's the basic definition of conflict resolution. And for mediation, it's an intervention of a third person into a dispute to assist parties in negotiating their situation or their disagreement. Sometimes you'll hear conflict resolution or mediation. Sometimes you'll hear conflict resolution and mediation. It'll be used interchangeably or it'll be used separately. In my opinion, I think both are kind of correct because conflict resolution can be a form of mediation in the same way that mediation can be a form of conflict resolution. Oh, I went backwards. I'm so sorry. Okay, so in Western practices throughout my research, not just my research in the peer mediation that I assisted with, but also through some of my classes that I've taken over the course of being at Mānoa, or even just this semester alone, there's traditional strategies. And what I've noticed is that a lot of these traditional strategies, I like to think of it like a tree. Instead of getting down to the root of the problem, it really just prunes it and it focuses on the outside aspect of it, but it doesn't take the time. It doesn't always take the time to get down to the root of it, to find what the center of the problem is and to lomi that out. And also Western mediation, it does this thing where it goes peace versus absence of violence. Now, there's a difference between peace and absence of violence, from what I've learned. Peace should be all-encompassing. It is representative of absence of non-direct violence and absence of direct violence. It's negative peace and positive peace. But Western mediation really just focuses on how can we solve the situation at hand to just get rid of the violence. That's the main focus of Western mediation and conflict resolution, is getting rid of the violence. But true peace is focusing or coming to a communal agreement beyond just abstaining from violence. It's working together to find a more peaceful solution. And then also there's this gendering that happens of conflict resolution strategies. It's something that I've learned in many of my courses where they've assigned genders to these specific traits that people in conflict resolution, whether it be lawyers or negotiators, mediators, that they have. And it's a way to just kind of change the dynamics. And it's also something that I learned in my political science field. It's the difference between soft power and hard power, and which one is praised over the other and used in certain situations. Some of the topics that I just went over. Hard power is very militaristic. It's physical strength, it's coercion. Those are the defining keys of hard power. Hard power would be, I know hard power. I'm a political science major, I promise. I know what hard power means. But hard power, I'm trying to think of an example throughout history. It's a lot of, it's World War I, it's World War II, it's this display of physical power. But then when you think of soft power, it's the Brussels exhibit in 1985, the American political strategy of humanizing a lot of what America did in order to bring people to this understanding, hey, we're human too, you can work with us. And by using this soft power, this relational aspect or political strategy, they were able to draw in a lot of not competitors, sorry. They were able to draw in a lot of allies because this was during the Cold War in 1985. And that was a whole battle of political ideologies. And before I go on a spiel about the Cold War, I'll move on to the next keyword. Then there's also this masculine versus feminine in conflict resolutions. Throughout my research, because I really wanted to spend at least a little bit of my talk today just kind of talking about the gendering of conflict resolution. It's and neither of these traits that masculine and feminine traits are assigned are negative in any way. They all offer different things. They all have their strengths and they all have their weaknesses. Masculine traits are noted to be aggressive and optimistic and judicial, whereas feminine are more caring. It's compromise, it's community, collaboration, it's selflessness. the reason why those traits were assigned feminine as their gender was because of colonial ideologies against Indigenous perspective. Indigenous really focus on community building and relying on each other and working together, whereas the colonial ideology is to dominate, it is to coerce into like your perspective. It is to pressure others to gain your perspective, whereas Indigenous, they come with their perspective, but they understand that it's not always going to come out the way that we want it to. And so that's why there's this power dynamic within conflict resolution. We see it in our politics today that when we see our congressional and our legislative boards meeting together, and they're always fighting and they're always debating. And that's why we're so split on politics nowadays, is because we've valued this idea that we have to get our perspective on the board. We have to make sure our perspective wins over everybody else's. Whereas from an Indigenous standpoint, if we all just come together as a community, there's this Native American practice where it's a group circle. And a group circle is meant where you all come together and we talk first before deciding, and everybody gets their chance and they gets their time to share their opinion, to share their mana'o. But it's with the understanding that not one person is going to win over the other, that we're all going to come together to try and reach a better understanding. Peace versus absence of violence. There's these two quotes that I really wanted to point out. Peace is a relationship existing in an absence of direct physical violence and presence of basic human conditions. And also negative peace, which is the absence of tension, and positive peace, which is the presence of justice. The second quote is given by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And it is very representative of, again, it's not to say that Western practices of conflict resolution are so terrible because they don't encompass all forms of peace, but it is a perfect representation of Western practice, that negative peace is the absence of tension and positive peace is the presence of justice. And we think of this negative and positive as two separate areas, whereas they should be working together and coming together. Yeah. Okay, now I'm going to go into different Indigenous practices. So these are some of the ones that I wanted to highlight. Shaneli Warada in Somali, there's this pastoral community, and they have this practices of, their practices of conflict resolution really rely on, or it really focuses on how their disputes impact their relationships with the land, which is something that, you know, as Hawaiians, we think about our relationship with the land and our relationship with each other. And in Somalia, that's this pastoral community, they think about their relationships with each other and how can they better those so that they can better their relationship with the land. The Indigenous Peacemaking Initiative was started for Native Americans, and it's a community-directed conflict resolution process. And it focuses on showing people the traditional rituals, as I just mentioned earlier, the group circle and clan structures. So it uses a lot of the traditional rituals, but applies them to current conflicts, whether it be between two people in a relationship, two family members, or two community leaders, or a community leader and someone random in a community. Just, it's folding out those personal relationships, but also the professional relationships. The Oromio National Regional State in Ethiopia, that was a really interesting article, I have to say. Their conflict prevention and arbitration tactics, they really just try to focus on always having a mediator within the community. Arbitration is, it's a legal form of mediation in a way. And that's how this community in Ethiopia, there's a lot of different ethnic communities within Ethiopia, but this specific one, their focus is arbitration. They always have a mediator in their situations. Instead of preventing, or instead of doing conflict prevention between two different people, there's always going to be a third person there, a neutral third party to help the situation, because they understand that sometimes you can't get out of your own head, that you need another person who understands their impact on the community to come in. The Ku'ikahi Mediation Center here in Hawaii. Their mission is to empower people to come together, to talk and to listen, to explore options and to find their own best solutions. It focuses on teaching and healing healthy methods of conflict resolution with others and also within yourself. It's physical health, it's mental health, and it's also spiritual health. Papaʻololokahi are classes that are supported by the Papaʻololokahi organization at the UH West Oahu, it teaches hoʻoponopono as an alternative to Western practices of mediation and also health practices. I have a few friends who are in that class, and it really just opens your eyes to not just the cultural perspective here in Hawaii, but the community perspective of how to deal with pilikia. This olelo no'eau is shared at the end of ho'oponopono session, but I wanted to share it now because I think it exemplifies really what Indigenous perspectives of conflict resolution is all about. It's ke kalu. I need to move this. Ke kala aku nei o ia oi e pela no ho'i o e kala ia mai ai. I unbind you from the fault, and thus may I also be unbound by it. There's this Bible scripture that I was taught growing up, and it's hypocritical of you to point out the splinter in your brother's eye when you yourself have a branch in yours. And that's the basis of a lot of ho'oponopono and also other Indigenous practices, is that when you come to these types of sessions, when you come with the thought of resolving your conflict, it's not just asking for forgiveness or giving forgiveness, but it's asking for forgiveness in yourself. It's about accountability. And that's kind of where Indigenous perspectives can really assist in a lot of our Western practices today, because there's this lack of accountability in some areas. And by teaching just this basic value of accountability, of forgiveness, we can heal a lot better. So ho'oponopono is it's this Native Hawaiian practice where we come together, and just like a peer mediation, where we'll have one mediator or two mediators, and you'll have the people who are having a dispute. And there's different phases, and I'll go over them in a little bit, but traditionally ho'oponopono was used for family disputes throughout time. In our culture, it was between different families, or it was within a family. Actually, in 1994, the Native Hawaiian Bar Association, they established na'aupono for families to be used and assigned by the family court. And there's different phases of ho'oponopono. So it starts off with a pule, whether that be to a god, or it's aumakua, your ancestors. Sometimes it's your kupuna, your parents, or sometimes it's a family member that you're praying to, and it's asking for guidance as we go into this session. And then there's this phrase kukulu kumu hana, which is, it can be taken in different ways, but essentially it's why we're coming here today. What is the problem? Why are we coming here? Why do you want this to be resolved? And then there's the next step would be mahiki. Mahiki is to peel something, or the process is one layer at a time, essentially. It's not getting down to the root of it right at that moment, but it's peeling it back one layer at a time, finding the problem. Okay, if this is the problem, then what's next? If that's the next step, then why is that the problem? It's focusing on the little intricate details instead of just glossing over something to get to the solution. And then there's ho'omalu, which is a timeout, because sometimes these types of situations, they need a break. It's just like a legislative session, how they need breaks, because they can't just constantly be arguing the entire time. They need breaks so that they can better themselves, they can better their research, they can prepare better, whatever it is. Ho'omalu is a time away from ho'opono to be able to recuperate, but also time to reflect on yourself and take accountability from all that you've learned so far. And then there's this value in ho'oponopono where it's oia i'o, which is absolute truth. That's what it means, that when you come into ho'oponopono, you are having the utmost integrity and the utmost honesty for yourself and for that other person. That's something that helping Jose with the peer mediation conference, we really teach about honesty and integrity and making sure that we're completely open in these sessions, because you can't only share what you feel is relevant, but we have to uncover what is really going on. And then there's kala, which is to release. And so that's at the end of the session, we're releasing all of the pilihia, all of the problems that we just talked about, all of the bad feelings, all of the resentment, anything that we feel we need to release, good or bad, that is when it all comes out. And that is kind of like the concluding time. And then it also closes with another pule. Also shared during the kala time would be this olelo no'eau. You kind of close with that, the ke kala aku ne'eau, ia oe e pela no ho'i au e kala ia mai ai. There's this quote from one of my sources that I just really liked. Are you willing to kala your brother? Free him entirely of this entanglement of your anger. Remember, as you loosen your brother from his trespasses, you loosen yourself too. As you forgive, you are forgiven. And as I talked about earlier, forgiveness is very key in ho'oponopono and a lot of different Indigenous practices. And it's not just recognizing that you have a problem with another person that needs to be solved, but it's also recognizing that you have to let go of your own resentment, that it's not just about that other person taking accountability for their actions, but it's you releasing them so that you're not going to hold it over them anymore. One of the, I guess, kind of concepts that I drew from this entire topic, just learning everything that I've learned so far, is how we need to switch from arguing with each other to having a conversation. It's not just who's right and who's wrong, but it's how can we talk? I feel one of the things that I feel deep in my heart is that it's very hard to have a conversation sometimes with people today, because everyone, and it's no one's fault that we feel this way, but sometimes we've been silenced for so long that we just fight to be able to be heard. And so I think if we all took a step back and we all recognize that people have things to say and people have things to share, that we wouldn't be arguing with each other. We wouldn't be fighting. It's like me and my siblings at the dinner table fighting over who's going to get the last pizza. It's just, no, I want it. I'm hungrier. I'm bigger. I get it. I should get it. It's stepping away, and instead of just constantly shouting over each other, it's being able to have a peaceful conversation where we listen to each other. Another value that we're taught is active listening. How can we listen to what another person is saying and actively take what the content and their words and apply it to the situation? How can we reframe it? How can we take what they're saying, listen, and show that we're validating what they're saying, but then also be able to have a conversation about it? That's all that I kind of really have right now. I put my email in case anybody has any questions afterwards. But yeah, thank you everyone for being here.
Thank you, Naomi. I'm gonna close out your share screen so we can just have some conversation, if you don't mind.
Good. Okay.
Oh, someone in the chat asked, can you please spell the different steps of the process?
Sure, I can put it in the chat.
Okay. I was gonna say, or if there's like a website that you recommend, that kind of stuff.
I might have a source that I can put the
Yeah, no, we can always add it later on as like one of the resources, because this recording will end up on our Matsunaga YouTube channel. Oh, there we go. Let's see. I was going to ask, as far as because you've been learning since how early on age-wise did you learn about the practice, and because I imagine first you experienced it in the school family settings, and then you learned about the procedure later on.
Yeah, so I got into Kamehameha when I was in the 6th grade, and that's really when I got exposed to it. Was throughout 6th grade, they teach you Hawaiian studies, and then 7th and 8th grade is Hawaiian language. But still, in those courses, we're learning our language through the different practices that it's singing music. It's I remember my 8th grade teacher, when he first kind of exposed us to ho'oponopono, we weren't allowed to speak English. And most of us were in the 8th grade and we barely know how to speak Hawaiian. So we all know about like 2 phrases. But I just remember that so distinctly. And then I got later exposed to it as being used between, it's between 2 classmates, or it's between a classmate and a teacher. This ho'oponopono was being used at my school to be able to heal the relationships. I had this my senior year, my sophomore years, when we were really taught it like as a lesson, and we had to learn how to do all the different positions, and we had to be the disputant, we had to be the mediator, we had to understand where each person was coming from and how to hold ourselves in those positions. My senior year is when we really just kind of fleshed out a lot of those skills, and tried to better understand the value system. My Hawaiian history teacher, my senior year. So at the beginning of the ho'oponopono session, you usually have sometimes it's a kahu. In old Hawaiian tradition, it's the kahuna. It's the person who is leading and who is taking care of those disputants. In this case, it was my Hawaiian history teacher. And usually what you do is you have a tea leaf and you're going to dip it in. Sometimes it's ava, the root. It's something that you drink before a special ceremony in Hawaii. It's not Hawaiian alcohol. It is contrary to a lot of what people believe. It's a mind numbing and also a body physical numbing root. It's very healthy for you, actually. But they'll dip the tea leaf in there and they're supposed to brush you with it. My teacher did not brush us with it. He just kind of
shook it a little.
he like shook it a little, maybe snapped our head a little. But that class was when we really learned how, and I guess like the impact of it over.
Thank you so much. One of the questions in the chat we have is how do you think Indigenous conflict resolution practices such as ho'oponopono can be implemented in large-scale peace-building initiatives without taking credit for these Indigenous practices in their own right? One example being many non-native or non-Kanaka Maoli individuals and groups take the concept of ho'oponopono and use it in the wrong context.
That's a good question. I have to say that first and foremost, that is a really good question. That is a problem that we come to face now, is especially like if you were to put ho'oponopono in a search box on Google, you're gonna get different businesses. Some like there's this massage business called ho'oponopono, and in a way, ho'oponopono is meant to lomi a situation. It's meant to massage out the folds and the kinks, but I had a Hawaiian teacher. That would be my second year of college, and what she would say about this situation is that we're not going to be able to stop people from not taking credit, but from using a lot of sometimes it's terminology, it's our concepts, it's our practices. But what we can do is we can shine a light on the truth of the practices and how we do those things. And I think how do I think that Indigenous conflict resolution practices could be applied or implemented in large scale peace building? It's going to be a community effort. I think the great part is that there's a lot of Indigenous communities who have this, like I was saying, there's this key value of community. In Hawaii, it's the word lahui, it's ohana, like those are, and then spread wide amongst all the different Indigenous communities. The word community is key. Me and Jose were talking earlier today, and we're talking about peer mediation and how it's building the community for this, and that's the best way that we're going to be able to implement these different strategies and these different lessons, is by building that community and establishing that community. I hope that answered the question.
No, thank you. And you actually touched upon, and there was another question about what's your perspective of the widespread, basically commercialization ho'oponopono, someone had mentioned that there's like 342 products that come up if you go into Etsy, and I like look,
Yes.
and it's just, yeah. So it's, it's taking a higher road, and yeah, unfortunately, a lot of it's just commercializing it, unfortunately, and without truly understanding the true meaning of it. But a big portion from what I've learned of Ho'oponopono is making things right. That's really what Pono is all about. And so all you can do is speak your own truth and make it right as best as you can in the spirit of it. So thank you for that. What
Yes.
uh, So one of the things I always love to ask folks about is, especially in the conflict management field, you're constantly working with lots of folks, and I know in your case, I don't know if you find this, though, you're utilizing Ho'opono practices in your everyday, or in, I don't know, in the past few years, you've utilized it in some capacity?
I think I haven't done a full session since I was in high school, but it's about keeping those values with you. That's kind of the main thing is, I talk about the oya i'o, it's having absolute truth. It's mahiki, it's peeling back the layers and trying to get to the root of it instead of just glossing over something. It's that first olalono eal that I shared with everyone. It's having the value of forgiveness and not just holding people accountable, but holding yourself accountable. I value accountability. It's one of the most important things to me. And so that's the way that I carry myself forward. If it's something that I expect out of other people, then I should myself carry forward with that.
Thank you. And I guess my question, which I actually didn't get to, was
Oh, I'm so sorry.
no, don't worry about it. Thank you. My question is around self-care, especially whether you're doing Ho'oponopono, whether you're a mediator, whatever it may be. I mean, you talked about, going to law school, and you're dealing with other people's problems. So what do you, what do you do for self-care, or any words of wisdom?
Uh, you know, so I'm picking my words carefully because my parents are here. um, I think I've had to come to the realization that I can't fix everyone's problems and I can't take on everyone else's problems. Just because sometimes I think that I might have the right answer, that I can help in a certain way, sometimes I have to take a step back and be like, you know what? They need to do this on their own because me being a part of the solution is just tearing me down a little bit too much. And the whole point of community is to have a community of support. It's not just one person was never meant to take on everything by themselves. um that's not how life works. We're not supposed to just take on the whole world, and we can't save everyone, but what we can do is, again, come together and work with each other uh to I lost my train of thought. I'm so sorry. But
No,
what
no,
we can do
thank
is come together
you.
to try and help each other out.
I mean, it kind of goes back to what you talked about community earlier. I- if you're trying to take it on for yourself, then kind of gets beyond, away from the whole concept of building community. And simultaneously, in my own experience, I've gathered that just, you know, we're not 100% perfect, and there's not a way that we can handle every situation, because some situations just hit too close to home, and it's okay to just take a pause, take a step back, be like, hey, I'm not the right person to handle this, but there's these other great folks that could possibly, assist you in that process.
My favorite life lesson is that no is a complete sentence. And while I'm still teaching myself that, I'm allowing myself to say no. It's something as simple as a coworker asking me to cover a shift, and I want to be like, yes, I can take it. But I'm like, oh, no, no, no. I have a presentation tomorrow. I shouldn't cover your shift. But like, even allowing myself to say no is something big. And so it's a life lesson that I'm still trying to teach myself, that like, no, I can say no. I don't have to say yes all the time. I don't have to do everything. I can say no.
Very true. And there's great power in that. And so thank you for recognizing that. Another question we had in the chat, someone mentioned, I know Manu Meyer has written about ho'oponopono, but do you have other authors or scholars you like to reference that people can reference when learning about ho'oponopono?
So I don't have any specific author except for Manu Myers about ho'oponopono specifically. Um, there's a book written by one of my professors, Professor Osorio, not John Osorio, his daughter, uh, Heoli Osorio. She wrote a book called Remembering Our Intimacies, and it's about reconnecting with the land and reconnecting with each other. It's but I just found that book really helped me understand Ho'oponopono on a different level, because like I was talking about with the Somali people, where that pastoral community really tried to understand how to best and effectively deal with the disputes within their community so that they could figure out what their disputes are with the land. And that's kind of that book, specifically Remembering Our Intimacies. It really helped me understand that Ho'oponopono wasn't just about my dispute with a friend or my dispute with a family member or a professor. It's about how can I fix this relationship so that we can come together and be productive rather than just be arguing the whole time. Sorry, I don't have any other authors off the top of my
No, thank you so much for that tidbit. I was actually going to I'll put the book in the chat. I was gonna.
I'm writing the different steps. I did not forget
Oh.
about you.
I've in my time here hearing and learning about Ho'oponopono from different individuals, I've seen that there's different approaches to it. You know, some folks have talked about it from like how it's done in a household, and how the kapuna do it is very different than a coach at Kamehameha Schools may do it. And even when there's like video footage from the 80s to something from recently. And so I guess I'm guessing there's no wrong or right way. It's just a matter as long as going through the right process, which you kind of put in the chat right now. It's my understanding, or you kind of adapt it to the situation.
Yeah, so you follow this structure when you're doing Ho'oponopono. There's the structure that I put in the chat and that I shared earlier. That's the basic structure of Ho'oponopono. But I've experienced the same thing where people will have different takes on it. And honestly, it's people who are from different areas of the island or from different islands in general. Something that we learned is that each island has its own little community, but even back in Kamehameha days, even before that, each island just had their own characteristics, their own way of teaching. And while they were all encompassed into the Hawaiian Islands, they each had their own personality and their own, and in this case, their own way of understanding Ho'oponopono. And that's the same thing with how a professor might teach it versus, again, and I know a football coach at Kamehameha who teaches Ho'oponopono. The way that he'll teach it is going to be very different than how I might learn it from my professor. But I think understanding those key values, especially in my opinion, I think Oya I'o is going to be one of the key values of Ho'oponopono, because you can't really solve a problem without having all the answers. It's like having an algebra problem, but like there's one number and all letters. You can't. You need to uncover all the different parts of the problem. You need full honesty, and that's where integrity comes into it. And then that's where the rest of all the different values come into it too.
Thank you so much. Are you as a so you're going into law school? There's been a growing rise of the fields of mediation and law kind of coming together, where folks get trained as mediators and as lawyers. Have you seen that same with lawyers and Ho'oponopono or Indigenous practices?
I know that I was able to talk to a lawyer at Mehe'ula Law LLC. We had a short little phone conversation about, well, actually, it was about a job, but it was actually about, I had talked to him a little bit about how his cultural perspective kind of dives into his work. And it's really, we didn't talk about ho'oponopono, but when we talk about cultural perspective and then bringing this in, it reminds me of William S. Richardson, the guy who the school is named after. He, I had to do a project on him back last spring, and I know it turns out now I'm going to his school, but one of the things that I just really liked learning about him was that he took what he was the uniting factor between all the different communities in Hawaii. And he took the uh, different Hawaiian values, such as the water rights, how he made it to where Hawaii is one of the only states where you can't own water. And he was instrumental in making sure that that happened, because he understood that in Hawaii we don't believe in owning, well, first, we don't believe in owning land, but we don't believe in owning water. And so he was able to protect those rights. And it's uh things like that that, you talk about, where's the crossover between ho'oponopono and law. And I think it's more so about uh value systems and how can we apply that to the law that we're going to be learning. And that's something that I definitely want to dive into um, in my time at Richardson, especially with the different programs that I'm definitely going to sign up for, and uh, different clinics, because I think that law is based on the area that you're going to be in. And they always say, like, go to school where you want to practice, and I want to practice here because I believe in the cultural values that I've been taught to take care of my community, and I've been taught to take care of my family, and I know that I can do that at Richardson. And that's what I hope to take in to my future as a lawyer.
Thank you. Thank you. Something else you kind of alluded to is the fact that every island has its own practice. And especially if we have folks joining who are listening later on who are not maybe in tune or knowledgeable about Hawaii beyond like the stigmatized tourism that we get. Because we sometimes when we talk about the Kanaka Maoli community or the Native Hawaiian community, um, just to solidify the fact that it's not there are multiple different communities within that and multiple practices within that, and it's not just as though it's one sector that just operates the same. And my understanding is like even within one island there's like different regions of the island, folks have different practices in itself. So
Yeah, growing up, it was so in Hawaii we have a ahupua'a system where everything is so within the on the island of Hawaii, it's the different moku are it's gonna be Kohala, Hilo. I'm like running through this. Oh my goodness. Kamehameha is gonna be so disappointed in me. Puna, Ku'u, Kona. Is it 5? I think it might be 5. Oh, am I missing one? Anybody from the Big Island might want to just help me out there. But anyways, within that, there's different section. It goes from Malka to Makai, and then you're gonna have Ili, which is different sections within that. And within all these different sections, you're gonna have Olalo Noeau about the place. And Olalo Noeau are proverbs and their quotes or their sayings, their life lessons in ways to describe the people. It describes the plants, it describes the land itself, it describes the history, the kupuna and the amakua of that, the akua of that area. Like so the wind of Kapalama, the ahupua on this island, is called Olauniu, which is playful, it's kolohe, it's crazy, and which is interesting because if you know about the history of Kapalama, it's going to be E'epa. E'epa they're menehune, they're the mo'o, they're the people, not the troublemakers, but they're just like the little magical, I don't know how else to describe it as other than like the creatures that they teach you lessons and they also help, but they also kind of cause trouble too. And so the name of the wind is very telling of the people and vice versa. And, we're talking about the different personalities and the different lessons and practices within each area. And that's something that I was taught back at Kamehameha, is that every area is going to have their own way of understanding, and each one of them is going to have their own lessons, their own people, their own personalities. But at the end of the day, we're all coming together as one community. And I think that's the thing that separates a lot of it today, especially in Western ideologies, is that we're so focused on individuality, and which individuality is very important, but we focus so much on it that we forget about the community aspect, that we're all supposed to come together as a community and together. And so there needs to be somewhere in between that we kind of just get that to link up together. Sorry, I can go on a rant about Ahupua'a.
No, thank you. No, this is wonderful. And I'd actually never made that connection about the different ahupuas and how that actually solidifies really so much of a community. And for once more folks who don't know what an ahupua is, because I know we're using some language that may not be common, but I mean, for the most part, it's like everyone that kind of lived within the reins of a water stream that then went off into the ocean. But then people are so reliable upon each other because back in the day, it's if there is conflict, we need to figure this out because I'm relying upon you for taro or a certain type of something I'm growing, and I'm relying upon you for certain seafood, let's say. While nowadays, with commercialism and everything, people can just be like, oh, I'm going to get on a plane and leave, which is not something that was available back then. So, so just like a brief insight into how conflict has evolved over many centuries. But no, thank you so much though for this opportunity to learn further. If anybody in the audience has any questions or any comments, I did make it so you should be able to unmute yourselves if no one wants to write anything in the chat further. Well, I just have to say thank you so much for allowing us to learn a little further about your community. And if you have anything else to say, please. It's actually been quite a joy. You have a wealth of knowledge, and so I truly appreciate you opening up about your experiences, lessons learned that have come out of today's dialogue. Thank you for your kindness and your leadership. And we talk about earlier. You were talking about he really got into like a political science lesson with like what is it, the hard and the soft skill.
Hard power versus soft power.
Hard power, soft power. And all I could think about was like when I talk about the difference between peacemaking, peacekeeping, and peace building. The hard power is like peacekeeping, peacemaking, because we're going to send the troops to make the peace, and they're going to keep the peace while they're there. But the peace building is really more like the soft power, because it is more a collaborative approach, working with the community, that if we were, let's say, to leave a community, they're going to be okay. They're not going to break out into chaos because because with the hard power, many times you create peace out of fear, as a peer pressure, and unfortunately, that's not very sustainable for the long term. And so that's what I really appreciate about all these different practices and different ways to manage the conflict. And yes, they tend to be very reactive, unfortunately, which is very much in tune with human nature. And so one of the things we always try to strive for is that I just mentioned is like, how can we be proactive in our approaches? And so how can we possibly occasionally just take a pause, take a step back, try to observe what is the culture that's nurturing this conflict, this cycle of oppression, and what can we do to kind of shift that conversation? Because many times we're so on the go, even as slow as we sometimes may move, I feel like we're always trying to catch up, whatever our lives may be that we're juggling. So if anyone out there is able to just take some time to reflect, I think there could be great power in the pause, as we talked about today. So, but thank you so much, Naomi, for today. Last but not least, I want to thank everybody else who's joined us today at this webinar. I really appreciate your interest and support in exploring the peer mediation and other conflict management tools